Oh, you're awake. Lie still, you've got a nasty bruise. Oh, where are we? You planeswalkers. We're on Kamigawa. No, don't leave. Stay, I'll make us some tea, and I'll tell you about our little plane and how great we are now. And then you'll love us and spend all your money here, and you can keep coming back again and again and again. And please just don't leave, because our Yelp scores are so low that if we get one more bad review, nobody's ever gonna come here again. And you don't want that, right? That's what I thought. Okay. What do I have here? You like legendary? We have so much legendary. No. Artifacts. Yeah, we do artifacts now. That's not enough. Stupid. Enchantments. Just screw it. Just take it all. White Blue's theme is vehicles. Vehicles are good because they tend to be cheap for their stats. So if you're able to consistently attack with them, you can pressure the opponent with larger creatures earlier. They also have the advantage of dodging sorcery speed removal. If you don't know how vehicles work, you can learn about them and all the other Kamigawa mechanics in our recent Rules Lawyer video. Now, Prodigy's Prototype, Mech Titan Core, Surge Hacker Mech, or Mobilizer Mech are the cards that might put you into this mech. I mean deck. Note that these are cards that care about vehicles themselves. Other vehicles may go in a vehicle deck, but could also work in any deck. Just because you have some vehicles doesn't mean you need to focus on them. Now let's talk piloting. Of the 13 vehicles in this set, 4 have crew 1, 5 have crew 2, 3 have crew 3, and 1 has crew 4. This means you just need to focus on getting 2 or 3 power creatures, and you can pilot almost anything. The best pilots are, of course, the pilots. Hotshot Mechanic, Kitsune Ace, Born to Drive, and Mech Hanger? But aside from these, you want the cheapest creatures with the highest power, and maybe they have a relevant ability. You're not going to find creatures with power higher than their mana value at 2 or 3 mana, so you have a lot of similar options. However, I would err on the side of artifact creatures, as there are several cards that care about that. Also, Moonfolk Puzzlemaker is a great scry engine if you have some vehicles with crew 1. Spirited Companion is a good girl for this deck because she adds 1 power to the board without costing a card. Anchor to Reality lets you sacrifice one of your pilot tokens, or good girls, to tutor up any vehicle, or even a reconfigure creature to be a pilot. Seven-Tail Mentor can buff your pilots or vehicles, whichever you need, and Suit Up is a cantrip that crews your vehicle at instant speed. The last thing to remember when playing vehicles is that most decks only have so much room for non-creature spells, and vehicles take up a lot of that room. So get your removal and card draw, but minimize your combat tricks and non-creature equipment. Next up is Black-Red, and it's... Oh, you almost had me. Blue-Black is Ninjutsu, and do I really need to tell you why you should play it? Okay, I will. Kaito creates unblockable ninjas. Silver Fur Master pumps your ninjas and cheapens their ninjutsu ability, and Satoru Umezawa gives all of your creatures ninjutsu. Now, a ninja deck needs 2 things: creatures with ninjutsu, and creatures to bounce back to your hand. Choosing your ninjas isn't hard. There are 12 in these colors, and all of them are playable. Some draw you cards, some gain you life, some remove creatures. All are pretty solid. But which creatures do you want to use to cheat your ninjas into play? There are 3 qualities you want to look for. The cheaper a creature is, the sooner you can start cheating your ninjas into play, and the easier it is to recast the creature after you bounce it. Evasion is important because a creature can't be ninjutsu'd if it gets blocked. And because these creatures are constantly entering and leaving the battlefield, you can reuse effects that care about that, like enters the battlefield effects and leaves the battlefield effects. Now, you generally want your non-ninjas to have 2 of these qualities. Inkrise Infiltrator and Thousand Face Shadow are cheap and evasive. Virus Beetle, Papercraft Decoy, and Circuit Mender are cheap with ETBs and LTBs. However, the best creatures for this are Network Disruptor, Okiba Reckoner Raid, and Gravelighter, which have all 3 of these qualities. Now, not all of your creatures will be evasive, so if you need to remove blockers, you can use cards like March of Swirling Mist, Saiba Trespassers, Clawing Torment, or Reckless Pursuit. Return to action makes the opponent think twice about blocking, and you can even sideboard it out once they've seen it in your deck. Other cards worth considering are Futurist Operative, which is expensive but can squeeze in a lot of unblockable damage, Kami of Restless Shadows, and Kotos, who have large ETBs that could be worth bouncing and replaying, and Acquisition Octopus, which can make your unblockable creatures draw cards. Any industrialized society comes with waste. Black-Red thrives on wasting artifacts left and right to help you waste your opponent. There are lots of good reasons to become garbage men. Dockside Chef, Heiko Yamazaki, and Scrap Welder turn your artifacts into card advantage. So Kenzan Smelter and Oni Cult Anvil create armies out of scraps, and, well, somebody's gotta do it. Like with ninjas, the best cards to combo with this archetype are cheap ones with effects when they enter or leave the battlefield. Ecologist's Terrarium, Virus Beetle, Experimental Synthesizer, Circuit Mender, Iron Apprentice, and Papercraft Decoy all fit the bill. Undercity Scrounger is notable for being a semi-reliable source of treasure tokens. Scrapyard Steelbreaker, Tawashi Songshaper, and Runaway Trashbot use your artifacts to grow big and strong, and Reckoner's Bargain and Voltage Surge are great spells to round out your non-creature package. There's not too much more to say here, just remember to err on the side of drafting more artifact creatures rather than fewer. Have you ever felt like you weren't good enough? Like you need to change who you are as a person in order to be useful? Then you'll fit right in with Red-Green Modified. The best reasons to replace your arm with a chainsaw, besides the obvious, are Goro Goro, Thundering Raichu, Kodama of the West Side, Hot Springs, Tawashi Guidebot, and Walking Skyscraper. Most of these cards reward you for having a lot of modified creatures, so this looks to be a go-wide deck. You can create hordes of creatures with Aki Emberkeeper, Teachings of the Kirin, and Searchlight Companion. Now, how to modify them? Modifications include auras, equipment, or any type of counter. The easiest modifications are the creatures who come pre-modified. Kappa Tech Wrangler, Heir of the Ancient Fang, Iron Apprentice, kind of Gift of Wrath, and Jukai Preserver, which can also be channeled to modify 2 creatures at instant speed. Crackling and Harmonious Emergence also turn a land into a modified creature. Now, any reconfigure card is great because it can modify or be modified, whichever you need, though the cheaper ones tend to fit better with the aggressive style of this deck. Lastly, cards that put +1/+1 counters on other creatures. Coiling Stalker, Roaring Earth, Ecologist's Terrarium. If you have a lot of enchantment creatures, Bearer of Memory and Generous Visitor are good too. Finally, you can use cards like Ambitious Assault, Kami's Flare, and Upriser Renegade to get in those last bits of damage that aggro decks tend to struggle with. If you're not much of a tech person, maybe you'll find solace in the wonders of nature. This deck wants to use sagas to accrue incremental value over time, resulting in a lot of virtual card advantage. For example, imagine a 2/2 first striker with, when this creature enters the battlefield, scry 2, then gain 2 life. At common, what would you expect this card would cost? Probably 3 or 4 mana. But by splitting up the components of the spell and suspending one of them for 1 turn and 1 for 2 turns, you get all of those effects for just 2 mana. Sagas give you a bargain price for their effects at the cost of having to wait a couple turns. So what are the payoffs for playing this deck? Satsuki the Living Lore cuts down on your saga wait time. Jukai Naturalist effectively does the same by letting you play them a turn earlier. Weaver of Harmony doubles your saga abilities. Norika Yamazaki lets you cast sagas from your graveyard, and Kami of Transience is a recursive threat that grows whenever you play an enchantment. In addition, because many of your effects care about enchantments in general, you want to draft enchantment creatures like Golden Tail Disciple, Spirited Companion, and Bamboo Grove Archer, which help you survive long enough to finish telling your tales. Other payoffs for playing a lot of enchantments include Skyblessed Samurai, Generous Visitor, and Bearer of Memory. Storyweave instantly flips a saga and grows the enchantment creature that it turns into. Geothermal Kami lets you keep retelling stories like a forgetful grandpa, and you can keep your hand stocked with Blossom Prancer, Commune with Spirits, or Season of Renewal. White-Black is all about balance. Instead of focusing on artifacts or enchantments, it wants you to use both. Brilliant Restoration reanimates all artifacts and enchantments from your graveyard. Michiko's Reign of Truth pumps your creatures based on how many artifacts and enchantments you control. Spirit Sister's Call lets you trade artifacts or enchantments on board with those in your graveyard. The problem with this archetype is that most of the bigger payoffs don't actually care about having both card types. Any of these 3 cards work just as well if you only focus on artifacts or enchantments. The only one that needs both is Naomi, which can be a good source of 2/2 tokens. Sure, there are plenty of smaller payoffs if you have both card types. When We Were Young grants lifelink in addition to the +2/+2, Assassin's Ink gets cheaper, Nezumi Blade Blesser gains Menace and Death Touch, Okiba Salvage adds a couple counters to your reanimated card, and Kami of Terrible Secrets and Roadside Reliquary draw extra cards. Soul Transfer is the best of the bunch, acting as a removal spell plus Raise Dead, but on the whole you are getting little enough extra value that it isn't worth trying to build around this theme, so you should only go into this deck if it's very open. But once you are here, You want to focus on drafting creatures that are artifacts or enchantments, because it allows you to work toward your theme without sacrificing your ability to build up a board state. And this is true in many of the decks in this format. Focus on those artifact and enchantment creatures. If getting into this theme is difficult, at least it's offset by how easy it is to get these creatures. I mean, there's Hotshot Mechanic, Spirited Companion, Sunblade Samurai, Chainflail Centipede, Dockside Chef, Leech Gauntlet, Virus Beetle, Runaway Trashbot, and this is just a small sampling of the many creatures that double as another card type. Like green-white, you want to play this deck as a value engine that grinds out wins in the late game. The Futurists invite you to join them as they push technology to the limit. Enthusiastic Mechanaut helps you play your artifacts sooner, as does Automated Artificer. Jin Cataxius and Replication Specialist copy any artifacts you play. Tezzeret, Reality Heist, Sky Swimmer Koi, and Thirst for Knowledge all keep your hand stocked. Clearly, Blue-Red wants you to play artifacts. However, with 52 artifacts available to this color pair, which direction you want to take that theme is really up to you. You could ping the opponent to death with flyers like Network Disruptor and Moonfolk Puzzlemaker. You could use walls like Rato Sentinel and the Reality Chip to stay alive while you charge your Dragonspark Reactor or Patchwork Automaton up to a one-hit KO. You could use cards like Unstoppable Ogre, Bronzeplate Boar, and Ironhoof Boar to overwhelm your opponent with brute force. I honestly don't have a lot to say about this archetype because it's so broad. Just draft a lot of artifacts and you're good to go. Black-green is ostensibly focused on graveyard recursion. And don't get me wrong, there's some definite graveyard stuff in the set. Kami of Restless Shadows, Okiba Salvage, Soul Transfer, Unforgiving One, Kami of Transience, Shigeki, Season of Renewal, Springleaf Avenger. There's just two problems. First, all of these cards use abilities from other color pairs. Ninjas, vehicles, enchantments, artifacts and enchantments, modified, channel. And second, there's no reason why you need to put them all in the same deck. There's no draw to be black-green specifically. Okay, Gloom Shrieker is the only reason, but you could splash that. I mean, there are dual lands at common. So while black-green has graveyard recursion available as a tool, that's all it is. A good effect, not a theme. I mean, I guess you could use Rato Sentinel and Dockside Chef to put cards into your graveyard that you want to get back, but that's about the extent of it. However, I think black-green's access to graveyard recursion makes it the best shell for playing shrines. The shrines are a cycle of uncommon enchantment creatures with end-step triggers that scale based on the number of shrines you control. They are legendary, so you can only ever have one of each. Now, in the past, shrines were only enchantments, not creatures, so they were more difficult to remove. Now that they're vulnerable to more types of removal, it makes sense to play them in the color pair that has the best ability to bring them back to life. Shrine Steward, Blossom Prancer, and Commune with the Spirits help you find your shrines. Commune also fixes your mana base, as does Boseiju Reaches Skyward, Grafted Growth, Greater Tanuki, or any of the dual lands. Once you have your shrines in play, you can defend with endless 1/1s, mill yourself to fill your graveyard with more goodies, mow down enemy creatures like sheep, deal direct damage to the opponent, or turn one of your shrines into a Chad. You could even use Mirror Box to let you duplicate shrines. Now, this is just one way to take this color pair. Honestly, black and green have access to just about every mechanic in the set, so you can kind of mix and match to do whatever you like. The samurai may have lost their Bushido, but they still have their honor in the form of Exalted. There are all sorts of effects you can gain when attacking with a single samurai or warrior. The best ones are the Yamazakis, who let you replay an artifact or enchantment from your graveyard. Tempered in Solitude, which impulse draws. Asari Captain, which lets your attacking samurai or warrior gain strength from all the others. And Ryu, who gives you an extra combat step. Attacking with just one creature is a tall order for an aggro deck, so you need to make sure that your one attacker can win the combat. Ancestral Katana makes your samurai big and attaches for cheap. Combat tricks like Regent's Authority, Kindled Fury, or Ironhoof Boar help your creatures survive or even trade up. Or you can focus on removing blockers with Unstoppable Ogre, Imperial Subduer, and Mothrider Patrol. Speaking of, you could use cards like the Patrol, Skyblast Samurai, or Befriending the Moths to evade blockers in the first place. Because your goal is to attack with a samurai or warrior every turn, you should avoid vehicles. Turns out, none of them have the relevant creature type. However, equipment creatures like Lizard Blades or Rabbit Battery are great for upgrading the samurai you do have, while still useful as creatures when you don't have samurai. Other creatures that do have the relevant type, and are worth playing, are Seven-Tail Mentor, Reinforced Ronin, Experimental Synthesizer, and Risona. Imperial Oath is only going to be helpful if you have a Sorry Captain to translate those extra tokens into power, or if you just have enough Exalted triggers that chump attacking is a good play, or if you're at the point where you can flunge and kill the opponent with your wide board. Eiganjo Uprising is a similar bit of reach to end the game. If the 7-drop Signpost is any indication, green-blue is all about ramp, but with the ability to channel your expensive spells before you have the mana to hardcast them. This card alone is a good enough reason to go into green-blue, but if you need more, there's Greater Tanuki, who is either a ramp spell or a massive beater, Shigeki, who lets you turn a silly amount of mana into silly over 2 cards from your graveyard, or Containment Construct, which lets you channel a card and then cast it that same turn. If we're gonna go big, we need lots of ramp. Moonsnare Prototype, Careful Cultivation, Boseiju Reaches Skyward, Grafted Growth, Orochi Mergekeeper, and Network Terminal are all good ways to boost your mana. You're also going to need spells that keep you alive in the early game. Mirror Shell Crab doubles as a counterspell, Cyber Trespassers taps down threats, Bamboo Grove Archer and Guardians of Abora are efficient walls. Assuming you can defend yourself, a late-game strategy is conducive to playing sagas. For the reasons we talked about earlier, you can get great value from Behold the Unspeakable, The Modern Age, and Azusa's Many Journeys. If you still need more payoffs, Thundersteel Colossus and Walking Skyscraper are massive, and you can make the X huge on spells like Awakened Awareness, Boon of Boseiju, Roaring Earth, or Spinning Wheel Kick. Finally, run some card draw in the form of Mnemonic Sphere or Thirst for Knowledge to make sure you find the right amount of lands to cast your powerful spells. Most sets have a rare or two that does something different than the main archetypes. This time it's Eater of Virtue, which absorbs the keyword abilities of every creature that died holding it. The best colors to put this in are white, then red, then black, then green, then blue. And the best ability to get is Double Strike, which you can find on Blade Blizzard Kitsune or Lizard Blades. There are no creature cards with indestructible, hexproof, or protection, so don't even try. But this card is priced aggressively enough that it's great no matter which abilities you can give it. Last, I always like to talk about what I think are the best commons in each color. For white, the best common is Intercessor's Arrest, which is a powerful pacifism spell that nullifies activated abilities and the ability to crew. Behind that is Wanderer's Intervention, an efficient combat removal spell. And number 3 is Spirited Companion. This guy is just a 1/1, but it counts as an enchantment, crews vehicles, basically everything white wants to do, all without costing a card. Blue gets an insane common in the form of Mirror Shell Crab. This is a huge finisher with Ward, but it can be used as a counterspell in the early game, and is the only card in the set that can counter channel abilities. And if you do channel it, it puts itself in the graveyard where you can reanimate it. Tamio's Completion takes second place as a capture sphere that removes all abilities, and number 3 is Skyswimmer Koi because turns out Phantom Monster is just a good card, and this also helps fix your draws. Black's best commons are no surprise. Lethal Exploit is instant speed removal that gets better the more modified creatures you control. Twisted Embrace is more all-purpose, but it's a bit riskier because you must have an artifact or enchantment to cast it, and if that permanent gets removed before Embrace resolves, it will fizzle. Undercity Scrounger is number 3 because if there's anything I learned from AFR, it's that black should not be allowed to have treasure. Red has 2 highly efficient burn spells in Voltage Surge and Kami's Flare. Take your pick, honestly. Artifacts are abundant, so Surge shouldn't be hard to kick, but Flare is more consistent. And Experimental Synthesizer shows that WotC is really working to give Red awesome impulse draw, which I love. Just remember that this should be played as late as possible to ensure you can play the Exiled card the same turn. Green has an amazing lineup of spells this set. Master's Rebuke is an instant speed punch spell for 2 mana. Greater Tanuki is a huge threat that doubles as an instant speed ramp spell. Number 3 is Fade into Antiquity because it answers 50% of the spells in this set, no questions asked. And I'm going to give you a 4th because green is straight fire. Jukai Preserver is a solid beater that doubles as an instant trick that can pump and modify 2 creatures permanently. At colorless, don't underestimate Ninja's Kunai. We've seen this type of card before, and it's usually bad, but this one is 3 mana for a 3 damage removal spell, and it only asks you to have a creature. The first 2 payments are sorcery speed, but I still think it's solid removal. And usually I would tell you to prioritize Evolving Wilds. Well, Uncharted Haven is basically Evolving Wilds, but you know what's better than that? The 10 dual lands showing up at common. Take them highly for fixing or potential splashing. Even just a couple duels makes your mana base noticeably more consistent. I am so excited to be returning to Kamigawa after 17 years. The plane has a lot to offer, and I like how they positioned this set as a struggle between the natural elements of the original block versus the technological elements of a cyberpunk landscape. Pre-release events start on February 11th, so don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like, and if you want to see more draft guides like this in the future, remember to subscribe.